This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good morning, everyone. As agreed at the Assembly's annual meeting on the 10th of May 2024, the Confirmation Hearings Committee is allowed to appoint a chair on a meeting-by-meeting basis for the 2024-2025 Assembly year. Therefore, for the first item of business, I will conduct an election for the chair for this meeting in accordance with the GLA's standing orders. In the event of one candidate being nominated, I will declare the nominated candidate chair of the Confirmation Hearings Committee for this meeting. A proposer and a seconder is required for each nomination. In the event of two candidates being nominated, I will ask for votes in favour of each candidate. So can I now ask Assembly members, are there any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Assembly Member Garrett.
Does anyone wish to second that nomination?
I wish to second Assembly Member Garrett.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations today? Then I can declare that Assemblymember Garrett is elected Chairman of the Confirmation Hearings Committee for today's meeting. Thank you.
All elections ran so smoothly. Thank you very much. So that brings us to item 2. Thanks, everyone. So ratifying the calling of the meeting in accordance with paragraph 1.7 of... Don't worry, we'll get to the bit that you think you're here for. We have all a little bit of preamble before we get there. So good morning, everyone. Can I now welcome everyone to this meeting of the Confirmation Hearings Committee. Please make sure your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. The Chair of the Assembly has agreed that this meeting be called as a matter of urgency to hold a confirmation hearing for the Mayor's proposed appointee to the office of Chair of the Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation within 3 weeks of the date of receipt of the notification from the Mayor in accordance with Section 100B, subsection 4, Part B of the Local Government Act 1972. I know that's a part we're all very familiar with. Can I ask now our Clerk, Diane Richards, if any apologies have been received for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies have been received, but in accordance with Standing Order 8.2, with the permission of the Chair, Assemblymember Bukhari is attending the meeting as a non-voting observer.
Thank you. I think we're all very happy with that. Welcome, Assemblymember Bukhari. Item 4, Declaration of Interests. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 3 and ask the members if they have any other disclosable pecuniary interest to declare?
Chair, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in that I used to work for Dame Karen Buck in her previous role as a Member of Parliament.
OK, noted. And can I also invite Dame, good morning, Dame Karen Buck, to declare any interest relevant to the business of this meeting or in relation to the proposed appointment? Not that you're aware of. OK. Item 5, we're nearly there. Item 5, minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of September 2024? Good, excellent. OK, item 6, that's our main item of business this morning, confirmation hearing in respect of the appointment of the office of Chair of the Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation. So can I welcome Karen Buck to the meeting? Good morning. And the committee will be putting questions to you in relation to your proposed appointment to the office of the Chair of OPDC. However, can I first ask members to note the background information circulated within the agenda of this meeting?
Noted.
Noted. Excellent. Thank you. Now we move on to the question and answer session. So if I kick off. So thinking first of all about your sort of personal attributes and capabilities, perhaps I could start with a broad question. Can you give us an example of a time when you have needed to show sort of leadership, strategic leadership of a large, complex organisation such as OPDC, and what lessons you learned from that you would bring to this role?
Thanks very much, and apologies for my voice, which I think is already a bit rough. I'm very excited by the possibility of taking up this role, subject to your confirmation hearing. And one of the experiences that I've had, which is relevant to that, is, of course, I was a minister in the Department of Transport. And during that time, I had the ministerial responsibility for London Transport. Obviously, that was also during a period of mayoralty, so it wasn't the direct control, but that was within my remit. And it was a time when it was the point when we won the Olympics, so we were just at the beginning of starting the strategic work for the transport planning. So that was a series of tasks that fell within my remit and had to be monitored. And I was also at that point in charge of the bus service and took a lead with the department in pushing forward the design and development of guided busways as part of the new approach to urban transport. So that has been within certainly the largest organisation that I've had a strategic role in. I've obviously also, at a more local level, have taken a number of projects, and at the moment I'm chair of the South Kilburn Trust and co-chair of the North Paddington Partnership, which is all about delivering services to particular areas to rectify kind of long-term deprivation.
And then I suppose the second part of my question was what you think, what skills and attributes and experience you think that will help you bring to bear on this role?
So the key role in the job description, the opening part of the job description, was to seek someone who had what I think they described as high-level political, small p political skills to work with all of the partners, because Old Oak, and it's at a critical time as well, but it is very much about working with the partners, the 3 local authorities, but also in negotiation with government departments, with the Mayor, and of course the GLA, and with what will be a number of other partners as well. I mean, from what will, as we go forward, be into the private sector partners that help with the development, to working with Imperial, to the local health service. So I think probably foremost amongst the skills, and it was to say that the top point in the description, is a 25 years plus of political experience working with partners and working at that kind of high level. And I would want to use that in order to be an advocate for this scheme, and to help broker solutions to some of the problems and the challenges that undoubtedly will arise as we go into the next development phase.
Okay, I think other members will come on in a moment to what some of those challenges might be and how we might face them. First, I have a question from Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you very much. Yes, just picking up on the challenges. OPDC has had funding from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero for a heat network, and it's got phases that are planned in running from 2026 to 2040. So we've obviously seen the problems with the heat network that was so dependent on fossil fuel, on gas in LLDC. So I'm wondering how you see the OPDC building in that future resilience in the way that they take forward their heat network.
Well, I mean, the next stage is to choose the partner to take forward the work on the heat network, and that is going to be something that I will be working with very closely to make sure we're choosing the right partner and looking at some of the practical problems that heat networks have experienced in the past. I mean, I'll be not taking the role up for another month. I mean, it is something I hope I would want to come back to you and talk to you about the detail of implementation at an appropriate stage. I'm sure it's something that the Assembly will want to look at very closely.
Mm-hmm. I think yes, I mean, I think obviously, you know, there's people living in buildings with heat networks who have been exposed to devastating rises in costs due to the volatility in the international energy markets. And I think sort of a lot of people, you know, sort of now, with hindsight, see that the LLDC network should have been based on ground source, which is what they're going for at Old Oak. But it's, I think the point is to make sure that, yes, that you're sort of how alert you are to the need to support the people who may end up living in these homes, to make sure that there is resilience in the heat network, so that there isn't that future, that same kind of problem that they've had at LLDC.
I totally agree. I mean, it's very much about learning from the experience of elsewhere to make sure we do avoid those problems, because the point of the heat network is it provides people with consistency and affordability, and is part of a sustainability approach. Now, I say I'm just beginning, as the post is not due to start until January. I'm starting that range of meetings now to meet with, well, obviously with board members and with partners, and will be immersing myself much more in the detail of that. Of course, it is also a question that, you know, this role is chair of the board, not an executive role, but clearly you would want to be informed and to make sure that we are learning from that experience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be asking questions on responsibilities and work for the Chair of OPDC. My first question is on community engagement. Now, the OPDC community engagement team have to ensure that residents, businesses and employees all shape the future plans for the area. And in 2022, the Budget Committee found that the OPDC had not been transparent in the way it communicates with local groups. There has been a promise of up to £7,000 for community grants and initiatives, particularly for young people, and to help champion local diversity. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that money is going to be invested? Do you have any plans for the future
again,
engagement?
This is very much the kind of work that I will be doing as I work into the meetings and take up the role from January. But what I do know is that although Old Oak as a development area is, unlike some other development areas, not as large a resident population, it has a very active core of residents, and the number of people is growing all of the time. And it's absolutely critical that we build on and improve that working relationship so that residents do feel engaged. And I think there's certainly going to be some challenges ahead as the station development unfolds. For example, we're looking at the likelihood that there's going to be road closures. There's going to be there will be an impact on residents from all of the major works going forward into the scheme. So a constant process of involvement is absolutely vital. One of the things that the Board Effectiveness Review highlighted is a need to look again at community involvement in the board and how that might be taken forward. And the officers are bringing forward a set of recommendations on how that is going to be implemented. I mean, looking at some of the experience that we've had in other areas that I've been involved in, and how you do that. I mean, there are some very good examples of practical work how you do that. In Westminster, for example, they've developed a community champions scheme where you actually pay people, local residents, to be part of your two-way process of talking to residents and involving people, learning about problems, and helping to inform the board process at the strategic level about how you do that. So I would be, in my schedule of meetings, will be obviously wanting to talk to the local residents to take forward the recommendations from the board. I mean, to discuss with the board how that recommendation will be taken forward. One of the particular areas that I think we need to do more work on is about young people, and how we get young people, how we get a potentially a panel. It's not easy to do. I mean, again, a lot of experience of doing this and trying this and see what works. But I think it's very important to do that and to make sure that we have young voices at the table. And just kind of the last thing on this as well is that although it's vital, absolutely vital, paramount to talk to and hear the views of the residents within the corporation area, it's also the neighbouring boroughs, the wards in the neighbouring areas, very high levels of deprivation, very high levels of impact, and it's about building stronger ways of talking, including through ward councillors, because I'm a great believer that elected representatives are part of the solution here and often don't get the attention that they deserve. But we'll be wanting to work with those neighbouring wards as well as the residential population.
I mean, your experience as an MP in the local area, you've got local contacts, and you've said you've seen the difficulties and challenges of getting particularly young people's voices involved in these kind of processes. So, do you think that the amount of funding that's between 1,000 and 7,000 is really sufficient? Because there may be needs for supporting those young people to pay for their travel, for example, for their amount of time. Is there any way that perhaps you might be?
Well, I think we'll review it. Obviously, these are things that I will want to look at and review, because it is necessary to make an investment to make this work, and I can't sit here before I've started and tell you what that level of investment should be, but clearly it is absolutely vital that we make this work and that we learn also from experience elsewhere about how about what the strategies will be. Working with the existing organisations, the existing civic society, from the residents to the multiple community, because there are, of course, not just one community, and it's multiple communities, and we need to make sure that we're hearing those voices as well, and we need to make sure that we do what is necessary.
This investment isn't just about young people as well. It also talked about the need for championing local diversity.
Totally.
So, how would you approach that particular challenge, and using your experiences that you've already had?
Because we are talking about, we use the word community, but what we mean is communities, because we have a population and a border neighbouring population that are very, very diverse indeed, and not necessarily all people engage through a resident network. They may do on very specific local issues like transport and mitigation around transport problems, but they won't necessarily in terms of their other interests and concerns and what they hope for from the area. So you'd be looking at mapping, and I know some of that mapping has been done, but mapping what organisations serve your population as well as what organisations exist within your population. So, you know, that some of these organisations will span North Paddington, North Kensington, Hammersmith, some will be Ealing based, and it's drawing from all of those boroughs to make sure that, you know, when you have a Bangladeshi population, you have a Somali population, for example, you're making sure that you're talking to those people where they are and where they have connections. I mean, one of my other very strong beliefs in this is that if you want to know what's going on in an area, you talk to the head teacher of the school, and you know, that's something I've always done, is build a really strong relationship with your schools, because they will tell you what is going on. They will tell you what the problems are that their families are experiencing.
I agree with that. As a primary school teacher, I can tell you we know everything about local
you know everything,
communities.
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's good to hear. I mean, you know, just my last point is that you know that you know you've obviously got a lot of experience in this particular area and engagement. Are you going to have a structured approach to make sure you're monitoring, making sure there's no gaps, making sure that all voices are heard? And is that an approach that you will be investing in too?
Totally. So again, if you're looking at what the functions of the board are, and part of the function of the board is to make sure that it is hearing from the community, the communities about that is something that you would have a set of indicators for, and that you would be managing that as a performance process. It's not just a kind of nice to have and goodwill, although you know goodwill is a very important thing in all of this. But you do need to absolutely make sure that you are setting, you're having a set of, I don't know if you'd call them targets, but certainly processes where you say what engagement is happening, how many people have you engaged with, what types of engagement are you achieving. One of the things that will be discussed is about board membership, about consultation panels, as well as the existing networks, and you have to line those all up alongside each other. You never just kind of rely on one set of engagement tools. There will be multiple ones, and you have to measure them.
Thanks. Any other questions on that area? So we move on to Assembly Member Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions on HS2. So obviously the station at Old Oak Common is really vital for OPDC overall. It's a lot of disruption. It's going to create a lot of challenges. What sense do you have at this stage of what those challenges will be and how you might manage them for the success of the project overall?
Well, obviously, it's very good news that the extension into Euston has been approved, and I think that lifts a very considerable degree of uncertainty about the whole thing. But the construction process is massively underway. I haven't yet had an opportunity to go to see it, and that's obviously going to be a very early task for me to do to look. But this next stage is going to involve an even further kind of set of pressures on the local area. We know that in terms of the building works, and it is going to involve potentially road closures, and the impact on the community is going to be massive. So that is one of the key tasks for the Old Oak Corporation, is looking at that and working with HS2 on what the impact of that and the mitigation is going to be. And it will be a work stream to make sure that is being measured and that we are as a constant process looking at the impact, not just on the residential community and the neighbouring community, as we've already said, but obviously massive impact on business. So in terms of kind of the Park Royal businesses and listening to what they have to say about how that's going to be dealt with.
Thank you. And you mentioned obviously it is fantastic that it is confirmed that HS2 will now come through to Euston, but obviously, the uncertainty of that must have had an impact on the project overall, OPDC overall, for some time, I would think. Have you got a sense of what work needs to be done to embed that confidence again and get things on track? What's something?
Well, I think we are at an absolutely critical stage, and the corporation is at an absolutely vital stage now. That decision's been made for the last kind of couple of years, and the negotiations have been underway with the Department of Transport, with HS2, Network Rail, to look at what the options are going to be for the release of land. I mean, that's now
Yes.
moving into its key stage, and I think probably these. If you ask me for one single vital task that has to be completed in the very near future, it's going to be that. It's going to be about making sure that those agreements are now reached, so that the Old Oak stage of the process can be taken forward, because it has been. I mean, projects this scale are always difficult and reliant on so many other things. I think the Old Oak has had its fair share of both very local and specific challenges, as well as being buffeted by national and global ones. And the uncertainty about HS2 has been part of that. That lifting now, I think, gives a surge of confidence to everybody to allow us to sort of underpin the work for going forward into that next stage. So it's, I think, an entirely good thing, but mitigation and seizing this moment now to make progress on the land assembly of the next ones.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Don't see any other indication on that topic. In that case, Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, Chair. So just picking up actually on the piece about the building of the station and all of that associated work. One of the just wondering whether you've looked into what has happened on the LLDC site over the years about particularly about walking and cycling, which were very much left at the edges, and it's now been kind of retrofitted in because the site was thought of as it's got to work for all the construction traffic. And I'm wondering if you're looking into how to make sure that the local residents continue to be able to cross roads, walk along roads and get to where they need to get to locally. Whether you've sort of looked into what happened at LLDC on that.
I'm about to read the book. But no, I am very much starting a lot of these processes. I mean, it's it's a couple of weeks since getting the appointment, so I'm starting having these meetings and I'm starting having these discussions, and obviously one layer of that is going to be how you learn from and hearing from other board members and members of the executive team about what they've learned from the LLDC experience. But I think that as part of the mitigation, I mean, I've mentioned this several times in terms of the next phase of construction work, the mitigation it's an enormous challenge, and that planning work is going on within the corporation. But you are totally right that although there will continue to be a need, an essential need for access for the industrial sector and for residents through alternative roads, the permeability for people who are reliant on public transport or who are cycling or walking is totally crucial. And there clearly is a lot to be done. I mean, one of the things that we haven't touched upon yet but might is the whole issue of public realm, and I think that there's a recognition from Old Oak Development Corporation that some of the work on the public realm really needs to move up a gear to make sure it's fit for purpose. I mean, I've walked around several times, and there are places where you don't really want to have to walk round, and we have to make sure that we are doing what we can within the budget to deal with that.
Yes, I think just making sure that sort of the board is keeping an eye out in your challenge of the exec for children, older and disabled people, that they can all get around easily and straightforwardly. So then what will you be looking at as chair of the board to reassure yourself that OPDC delivers the redevelopment of publicly owned sites in Old Oak West?
So at the moment, we've got, there's a planning process has been done and a business case that's been approved. And the next stage, as I've just said, the critical next stage is to complete the land assembly. And then the work will be beginning this year on the master planning process. So the board's task is to make sure that it is monitoring those stages of progress, so that the master plan, which will be running alongside the process of beginning to test the market for partners for development. This next year is a critical time for all of that. Those processes will all come together, so that we are making the maximum realistic speed now to get into the point where we can actually start building. I mean, in the end, what this is all about, all of these, everything that we've talked about is leading up to something, which is we need to build homes and generate jobs and look after the business sector, alongside that. I mean, it's not an either or, but it is the creation of homes, and I would argue it is also the creation of genuinely affordable homes in all of that, and the public land component where the target is for 50%, and I feel passionately about that. Is to make sure that we are building as soon as possible, and there's an outline time scale for that, and that we are making sure that those homes are homes that people want to live in, and that you can build a sustainable community in them. So we know that they are the top priorities, and we have a set of measures for making progress on that. And the board, and I went and observed the board meeting just over a week ago, and these were issues that were brought to the board, and the board will be monitoring them very, very closely indeed.
Thank you, and that's helpful and reassuring. Now, you mentioned businesses, and obviously sort of in any area like Old Oak Common where there's been a sort of potential of big change, you end up with this little ecosystem of quite marginal small businesses, and certainly many of those, again on LLDC, learning from that, kind of lost out.
Yes.
And so I just picking up on social value, and what sort of and things like this. You've got a huge commercial hub with many different food businesses in Ealing and Brent section of the OPDC. So what kind of social value do you recognise in these SMEs? And from the board, will you be championing social value as a measure of viability to both retain and attract small and creative businesses, social enterprises and not-for-profits? Yes.
So I think the economic and industrial sector in Old Oak is completely astonishing. When I live near there, it's kind of it's an area I know fairly well, and I think you are absolutely right. There is a potential. There's more industrial land being opened up. There is large employers are coming in. Large businesses are coming in. This is a good thing. They are bringing jobs with them. Sorry, I'm coming to the but just to kind of widen it. You've got this massive potential that the Imperial Life Sciences project is bringing to the whole of West London. It starts in Paddington, and it's moving all the way up, and it's a major partner in Old Oak. There's a great deal more that we can do about that, about exploiting the opportunities for business associated with life science. But absolutely crucially, what the Park Royal Industrial Estate does is provide a set of services and a set of businesses that are vital for the economy of North West London. As you say, it's a major food supply, but also hundreds of kind of small specialist businesses, growing creative sector as well, which I think is also fantastic. And there's always a risk with major redevelopment, and Park Royal is, that's not in a proposed early phase for this kind of development. So this is not an immediate threat in any way, but the risk is always in the long term that you improve an area which is wonderful, and new buildings are created and new infrastructure is created, and the rents go up to the point where you can't sustain small businesses.
Yes. And that's where, from the board, whether you can challenge the exec to make sure that they're building in protection possibly with affordable rents for small businesses.
No, totally.
That kind of protection of the value of those small businesses.
Totally. I feel very, very strongly about it. I think Park Royal is an astonishing place. And places always change. Of course they do. They change and grow. But keeping that vital, affordable, small service sector in there is going to be very, very important.
That's really good to hear, because I think that some of the very big businesses sometimes find it easier to make a social value case for themselves than some of the small businesses.
Yes.
So it's just making sure that there's an eye on that.
That you enable them to do that and work with them to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it from me, Chair.
Okay, sticking with this question actually about public realm, there's an old saying at Winston Churchill, we shape our cities and then they shape us. This question about public realm, what will this, we're effectively creating a whole new place, or several places probably. The question I suppose I have, when you have very tall buildings, and there will certainly be some quite tall buildings in this new development, what happens at ground level tends to make or break.
Totally.
So what are your thoughts on the sort of risks and how you manage those of places full of tall buildings?
Well, I mean, it's a totally valid point. I mean, something I feel really strongly about. It's not just because of a woman, but I think when women walk around cities as well, you feel it even more acutely, because when there is nothing at ground level, it's not a hospitable place. It's not a hospitable place for anybody. People love. In good cities, they love a vibrant ground level of activity, preferably going on to the evening as well. So I suppose, the first point to make about that is that a lot of this is about having the level of footfall that can sustain the business. So, so there's part of the development that's already happened where there is a ground floor that is waiting to come into full use. I mean, I don't know this for sure, but my strongly held belief is that there just isn't the level of the critical mass of people yet to allow for private business to take that up, and the additional the plan for additional the expansion in Old Oak will be a vital part of that. If you have the people, the businesses will be there. It's also about getting the mix right. So it's not just. I don't think it's just about tall buildings. I think it's the type of the mix, and you want as you want everywhere. I mean, there's been I think quite a strong emphasis amongst developers more recently on student housing and co-living, and there is a need for student housing and co-living, but you don't want a community that is entirely made up of a population that churns quite a lot. You want to have a community that you're building a neighbourhood in Old Oak. You will be building a neighbourhood, and that requires a residential population that has roots and commitment to the area. And the mix of that you put into the development is kind of absolutely vital to achieving that.
Yeah, thinking about
some of that also. The other thing is what you can do with some of your public service as well. So one of the things in the South Kilburn estate, which is a fairly critical stage of its development, is bringing in a health centre that will be part of the ground level and be open and welcoming and bring people in.
Yeah. So thinking. Sticking with this point about the sort of the experience of being in a place, and you're right, it's not just tall buildings, but when you see an artist's impression of something that's 10, 12 stories tall. In my constituency, we have multiple buildings now over 40 stories tall. The artist's impression, the bulk of the building is up in the sky, but actually how it succeeds or fails is all about what happens on the maybe ground and first floor, because that's how a human scale, that's how people are experiencing it. And you hinted at one of the problems there, which is that if there isn't the commercial viability, so if the developer says, well, there's no demand for something interesting, some kind of commercial space or leisure, retail, something like that on the lower floors, and you then end up with sort of the tendency these days with residential blocks is to, even if they're not hugely tall, let's say, we see a lot of it in Canning Town up the road here, say 10, 15 stories, this sort of dead, long stretch of dead street frontage, which is that block with just one door in it. how do you avoid that, particularly if the developers push back? You know, it's all well and good you saying it's really nice to have active ground floor, and the developer says, yeah, it would be nice, but it's not commercially viable. We haven't got tenants, we haven't got anything.
Well,
the way we're going to build this is just to go, boom, there's a block of flats, there's the ground floor, and you create 50 metres of nothing.
Well, I mean, part of the answer to that is each area has a unique component to it, because it does depend a little bit on, for example, you know, your proximity to other major shopping centres or other high streets, and you know, each area has to be kind of looked at in its own terms as to how to make it work. I mean, I think, you know, if you have the kind of density of population that is being proposed that we're looking towards in Old Oak, I don't see any reason at all that you're not going to be able to have a viable high street. I mean, the numbers will be there, the need will be there. But of course, you know, you hit on a critical point that is slightly unanswerable, which is that there's always going to be a negotiation between your development partners and the you know, in this case the corporation, or it might be in other cases it might be the local authorities, about what you are seeking to achieve, because you know, you want environmental sustainability, you want affordable housing, you want a kind of thriving public realm, and there's always going to be a to and fro negotiation with developers as to how you make that viable. Now, you know, what we will be seeking to do is, you know, this process of seeking a partner of master planning is to have, you know, be having those discussions at an early stage and setting out what the expectation of the corporation will be. I mean, I can't tell you exactly what that's going to look like. I mean, it's going to be, you know, very much for the planners to be coming up with those proposals and working on them. But you know, what we know we need is a mixed tenure development with stability, with a thriving high street that is in highly sustainable for people to be able to move about, and that welcomes people from, you know, of all ages and of all backgrounds.
Okay, thanks very much. Assembly Member Small Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. My question concerns housing, and a key aim of the London plan is for 50% affordable housing on public land. That 50% number is also reflected in the OPDC local plan. You mentioned earlier, in response to Assembly Member Russell's question, about your passion around that target. Could you say a bit more about that and how you would champion 50% affordable housing as Chair?
Well, I mean, part of the reason I'm interested in this job is because of is fundamentally because of the housing, because of delivery of housing. And I went on to the local authority, terrifyingly, particularly for you and your age, 34 years ago. And probably from the first day of being an elected representative in Westminster, housing need has been the single biggest issue. And over the course of those decades, we have seen a steady loss of affordable housing, and a steady loss of social housing in particular, as Right to Buy eroded the stock and wasn't replaced. And so, you know, we are now in a situation of an affordability crisis, and that is across all sectors, but it is particularly detrimental to the third or so of the population who struggle to be able to buy. So, achieving that housing target is I've talked about what I think our operational top priorities are, but in terms of my aspirational commitment, what I want to see out of this, it is 50% affordable and with a very strong bias towards social within that. And now the opportunity lies in the Public Land Assembly, so that does actually give you an advantage in being able to take that forward. It's part of the plan, it's part of the, you know, it will be part of the negotiation. And, you know, so far, the achievement has been, I think it's 38%, but it's obviously been, there's been private land as part of that too. But the Old Oak phase, this next critical phase of 6,000 homes, that has got to be absolutely central to what we're trying to achieve.
Obviously, you mentioned that so far it's been 38%, and something we hear on the Assembly a lot, on Planning Committee, on Housing Committee, is the difficulty facing development in London at the minute. The energy costs increase, construction costs increase. So I think my question is, obviously the 50% aspiration is fantastic, but do you think it's actually going to be deliverable in the near term on OPDC?
I believe it is deliverable from what I've seen, and that's, you know, it's what we are seeking to what we are seeking to do. And I will be certainly, in terms of my input to the board, making sure, and I see no reason that I don't think anyone is disputing this at all, that has to be an absolutely kind of ironclad commitment to achieving that. And if that means that you have to, approach your other partners for support and assistance in doing that, that's something we will have to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Just on the 50% affordability, so I suppose there are two ways, there are two types of affordable housing, aren't there, with a capital A and with a lowercase a. And with the lowercase a, that's much more about, the classical economic problem of supply and demand. So do you see a trade-off between, if you're holding out for a very high level of capital A affordable, let's call it subsidised housing, if you're holding out for a very high level of subsidised housing within a development, which challenges the viability, which I think is what Assembly Member Small-Edwards was just getting at, and then that could stall the whole site, and so you then potentially not only lose that capital A affordable housing, you lose all of the other housing as well, which reduces the overall supply and therefore harms affordability across the board in the more normal sense of affordability. Do you see that trade-off?
I can see that.
And how would you reconcile that? Like if you're looking at a site that risked being stalled because the developer said can't afford to develop it at that percentage.
I don't think doing hypotheticals is probably going to be very helpful, because I just don't know where I don't know where we're going to be at when we reach that point of negotiation, because I think, as we've hinted at before, you can do fantastic work at a local level as a borough or as a corporation, but when global forces hit you, you might be in a different position of how you're going to negotiate. It's hard for me to say exactly what that trade-off is going to be, and obviously the executive team is going to be involved in the minutiae of that negotiation. But I think that it's completely right and proper that we start by saying that is what we want to do. That 50% is what we want to do, because what we also know, these are kind of figures that have emerged in the last kind of few days, is that London local authorities are paying £4 million a day on housing homeless households. Now, I'm not saying there's a read across. There isn't a neat read across in that. But the big picture is that there's a read across. We have got a housing crisis in this city. It is particularly affecting the bottom third of the population, the lower income third of the population. We are subsidising people in very expensive private rented accommodation. We are dealing with a massive crisis in homelessness costs. And therefore, that has to be part of the wider context for the negotiations you're going to have to do to secure your affordable contribution, and it is on public land.
It's just that when you said it was an ironclad, I forget whether you said a promise or a commitment, you described it as being ironclad, the 50% target. So that's not the language of trade-offs, and I recognise. So you do recognise that if you held out for 50%, and if a developer said, well, I can't develop that site at 50% affordability, and so then the site stalls, and then all these problems you've just described, London councils would say 1 in 23 children in London,
yes. So
basically one child at least in every class in every school in London is living in temporary accommodation. One of the reasons for that is just not building enough for the population that we have. So if sites stall, a large site with hundreds of units that could stall over a viability negotiation, and then when you describe as ironclad the insistence on 50%, you can see the little red flag that's popping up in my mind that those problems don't get better if you just have sites left empty.
No, we do not want sites left empty. And sites, I am absolutely confident sites are not going to be left empty. I am very confident that we can work on the 50%. We can use the 50% affordable on the public land element of it, and that is absolutely going to be central to our task. Beyond that, I think it is getting into hypotheticals. I don't know how that negotiation is going to take place, and it's multivariable, but we have to do this. We absolutely have to do this, and we have to make sure that the affordable component housing is not the thing that always drops off the side of the table, because it so frequently does. And so if you're asking me what is my kind of driving commitment on this, it's to make that happen.
So the 50% would be, so in those negotiations, the 50% would be effectively a red line from your point of view.
Well, I'm not. So I say again, this is a hypothetical. I'm not going to be negotiating this. I'm, as chair of the board.
Well, presumably you'll be setting the terms on which the team would negotiate.
Well, we have said. The corporation has said that its plan is for 50% housing to be on the public land, and that is what I believe that we will achieve.
Okay. Assemblymember Russell, I think, on this point.
Yeah, just very briefly, I was actually going to ask whether you thought there should be a more ambitious than 50% target for homes on public land. It's public land, and it's, surely we could even be trying to be more ambitious if that can be worked out. I think if you set a limit of 50% when you go into the negotiations, you're never going to get beyond that. Sure. And we have a massive crisis that you pointed out is costing local authorities £4 million a day, a week,
a day, I think.
A day,
£4 million
I think it is.
Yeah.
And that's an awful lot of money.
Yes.
That would be far better spent in building actual homes. But yes, would you like to see more ambition than 50%?
Well, there are plenty of things I'd like, but as I say, it's a multivariable. We do want, we have to raise the standard of the public realm. We want there's public space there that has to be transformed. The canal has to be transformed. The environmental, sustainability has to be built in. So, I'm not going to come here and make policy. That's not my job. Is not to make policy. But obviously, the more affordable housing we can build into this, and be sure that it is viable and that it goes ahead, the better.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions on that topic. That brings us then to Assemblymember Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I have a kind of supplementary that I think links into some of what Assemblymember Russell, Garrett and Small Edwards have all been asking. So forgive me if it's slightly repetitive, but it's something I'm very much interested in and interested to kind of explore slightly further. And we can talk about targets, and targets being set and measured and criticised or applauded in different ways. And I think we, as politicians, we can all argue about the level to which we think local councils or the mayor or national government have helped or hindered in delivery of those targets. Now, today is probably not the right opportunity to have that argument, but I think be mindful that it is an argument that exists. But ultimately, I think nothing meaningful is going to happen without really attracting, maintaining and harnessing the interest and the activity of the private sector in making this happen. If the economy at the moment is probably not in the best shape it could be, and again, now's not the right opportunity to apportion blame to that, although I think we all have our views on that. But it's something definitely to be kind of mindful and cognizant of. So what I'd like to understand a little bit more is if overall the economy and the development sector is facing a lot of challenge, what can we do and what can you do with your position on the board to make Old Oak a more attractive prospect than anywhere else? So if you're chasing a sort of limited or shrinking overall level of investment, how can we make sure that here is where it happens?
I think the answer to that is actually a fairly easy one, which is the connectivity. I think that what is extraordinary and exceptional about Old Oak is its position on a transport hub. And that is phenomenally exciting. Now, as I said, the corporation will go out next year to starting the sort of soft process of finding out partners. And as that land is assembled, ready for building, which I think is itself a very exciting potential for development partners. I think that it already is. But the connectivity, the station development, the Elizabeth Line and HS2 is something that is really quite exceptional in London and across the country. So I would hope and believe that will be enough to really mark it out as something that people want to be involved in.
Perfect. Okay, so moving on then to the question that I've got on the list here to ask. So we've talked quite a bit about developing the publicly owned land at particularly sort of Old Oak West, but kind of looking slightly beyond that and Old Oak North and the challenges around there and the loss of the funding bid previously. I mean, do you have sort of future aspirations to kind of resurrect something there, and how would that work and to avoid a kind of future missed opportunity should one arise?
Look, I mean, I think you will know, and certainly kind of I have been briefed, that our absolute overwhelming programme of activity over the course of the foreseeable future is to deliver Old Oak. So, that's not going to be expanded, because delivering that, getting that land assembly, getting that master planning process, getting the economic development strategy right, developing on the community engagement, dealing with public realm and mitigation, that is a large task. And, I see that as being what the board is going to be focused on and the project's going to be focused on.
Just making notes. So sticking with this question of the track record of OPDC, if you like, obviously it's not had a glorious track record so far. It started, I think, in 2015. Along the way, had a plan to assemble a whole lot of land, particularly around the sort of, let's call it the car giant area. And ultimately that fell through and it had to hand back £250 million worth of government funding. What's your analysis of what went wrong there, and how would you avoid, obviously, a repeat of that debacle?
I'm kind of very aware of that being part of the history, so say sort of five years ago. I'm not sure that I can give you an analysis of everything that went wrong that led to that point, and I think anyway it would probably be a bit contested. What I would say is that my reading of Old Oak now is that it's a transformed organisation, that it came back from that. And, most huge developments will have knockbacks at some point. And I just would, at this point, actually pay tribute to the outgoing chair, Les Peace, who, has been there for 7 years through a very, very challenging time indeed, and has steered the organisation through, as has the Chief Executive, David Luntz, to a point where now it is poised for a growth surge and real progress on delivering on Old Oak. So I think lessons have been learned from that. But the task at the moment, the assembly of 90% of the private land for Old Oak has now been assembled. There's some more work to do on that. The public land, tying up that arrangement, it's a totally different set of tasks. It has to be done, and it's not without challenges, but it's not in the same league, and that's where the attention is going to be.
So what were the lessons that were learned, do you think?
Well, it's hard for me to answer that without saying I know exactly what. But that was a private sector, that was a privately owned piece of land that the corporation were seeking to work with. We are now, in a situation where the progress for Old Oak itself, the private sector land has very largely been assembled, with some more work to do, and the rest of it is a public sector land assembly. So that was a project that didn't work, and Car Giant remains there as a successful business, and now the focus is on this next phase, which will dominate the work of the corporation for several years.
Yeah. So my reason for asking is that I wasn't here for part of that period. I came in 2021 when it had not gone well. And obviously part of the job of chair is to challenge and scrutinise what's going on. And it's very easy for any organisation, OPDC or any other organisation, to tell itself a kind of, they all lived happily ever after story about how it's all brilliant. And the job of chair is to challenge that and say, is it all brilliant? No, which bits are not brilliant, and how are we going to overcome that?
I totally agree with that.
And so I suppose the subtext of my question is, are you just here to tell us how brilliant it is, or do you have a sense of what problems there have been, and a kind of hard-nosed mentality of challenging what might be a very cosy consensus within the organisation, which is what there was at that point, which turned out not to come true?
I certainly agree with you that the role of the chair is to challenge. Well, the role of the chair is to chair the board who challenge and hold to account the executive, and that's something in the work I've done elsewhere, from select committees through to the boards that I'm part of, I can do and will do. I mean, I think it's fair to say that I am only beginning that process, and as I say, won't even start the board for another month. I would want to understand that more, but I think fundamentally the issue is it was a private sector land assembly that that fell apart because of the the lack of an agreement with Car Giant. And you know, what the assumptions were at that time, I will want to know and understand more about it. But what we do need to be sure of is that in the tasks going forward, we are benchmarking progress on every one of those and asking hard questions, and the committee chairs and the board members are asking hard questions to make sure that we are on track. I agree that you shouldn't have a cosy consensus. I also agree that part of the role of the chair is to advocate for the organisation and to send out the message that we are at a point now where there is really exciting potential, and we want our private sector partners to be part of that.
Yes, no, you're right. So there's a sort of potential internal tension there, isn't there, in the sense that part of the job is to advocate, perhaps to come here and advocate,
yes,
and part of the job is to challenge and scrutinise.
Yes.
And my observation, not of you particularly or this role in particular, but of generally people in roles like that, the advocacy bit, the cheerleading bit, the popping the champagne corks bit is a lot easier to fall into than the asking hard questions and really pushing back against a plan, which every plan will have at least some weakness in it. So I suppose that's the question I'm pushing at, really, and perhaps you've said all you wanted to say on that.
Yes, I mean, I take the point. It's a creative tension, and key to it is understanding that it's a tension and that you're not only doing one part of that job. I can only say that in years in Parliament and on Select Committee, holding ministers of my own side to account as well as ministers of other sides to account, and officials on departmental plans and budgets. I've done all of that and enjoy doing it. And the fact that you have ministers on your side doesn't stop you asking very tough questions and scrutinising them, sometimes making them very cross.
Okay. So looking forward then, what would you say are OPDC's big strategic challenges right now, and what's your thought in terms... I don't mean right now. What are OPDC's big strategic challenges to deliver this project? So over the next few years, what are the big strategic hurdles to get over, and what is your analysis of how it does that? So,
as I've said, the first and most pressing priority is to complete the land assembly, and that is the work that is being done with Department of Transport in particular, but with other government departments, and making sure that the capacity is there to get that land assembly together. And once that is done and completing, so that 90% of the private land is assembled, but there is more to do. So making sure that work is progressed and progress is closely monitored. There's an issue in terms of the board, which has been the board effectiveness review, which has been undertaken, which has put out a number of proposals as to how the board should act at a more strategic level, and the officials are bringing forward the recommendations to implement that. There will be board vacancies, so recruiting those members of the board, and then getting the board to work together there's some outstanding ability on the board. I mean, I'm very clear about that already, and particularly in the committee chairs, but across the piece. But there will be need to recruit and to bring in to make sure that you've got the full range of skills on the board, and to get those for the board to work together as a whole. The third thing, again, we've touched upon it, is how you deal with the mitigation and how you make sure that your businesses and your residential and neighbourhood communities are supported, helped, and the work is done to make their lives decent during this critical stage, but HS2 in particular, but also as you move into Old Oak Common. The market testing for private sector partner, which is a highly positive development, and that's certainly one where I think that the role of advocacy is right. There's the corporation will be doing an economic development plan as well to work on the employment opportunities locally, and to develop a kind of a business strategy. I think probably they're the key issues. So, I mean, my job is to be the chair of the board, to make sure that those board members work as a team. It's about bringing together people with a number of different skills, and to support and challenge the executive team in making sure that you're progressing at the speed and in the way that you need to.
Okay, so land assembly, board skill, assembly, perhaps we could put it that way, and community relations. Access to capital and building cost inflation.
Well, I think that's integral to the next stage of the process. So the business case has been approved. The outline business case has been approved. That will obviously have to be kept continually under review. The local plan is going to be reviewed, and the access to capital, of course, flows from this set of partnerships. So with a private partner to take forward the Old Oak development. So that is going to be demonstrating to the private sector that there is a massive and exciting potential on that site, so that the capital can be invested.
Okay, thank you very much. Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of, in some ways, wrap up some of the things that you've been saying. And my initial first question was about the problem with the fact that there was a lack of transparency in terms of community engagement. And I think this is kind of filtering through our role with you in the need for that transparency, so to make sure that we're fully aware of when things aren't working, targets aren't being met. And I know from your experience as a councillor, you were one of the people who was calling out the fraudulent behaviour with Ho's vote scandal. So I'm sure you're familiar with the need to call out behaviour or things that are going wrong. So in terms of the things that happened with the car giant, again, all issues involving the lack of transparency and the London Assembly and the committees not hearing about those problems earlier on.
Sure.
What guarantees can you give us that you will make sure that we know if there are any issues or any problems before there are any problems or scandals or anything that could potentially go wrong?
Well, what I believe very strongly, and I mean it's a requirement, and a requirement I'm very happy with, is that the Old Oak Development Corporation and the chair is accountable to the mayor and accountable for reporting to the Assembly, and to come before the Assembly and to answer questions. And I believe very strongly that transparency and openness at early stages of problems is an absolutely is essential. I mean, I can only say to you, I believe that strongly, and I would want to do it. And I've seen in public life, as you've indicated, I've seen in public life where it's gone wrong.
Okay, I'm just looking around. I don't see any further indications for questions. I think that brings us to the end of our questioning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can I thank you for attending this morning's confirmation hearing. Thank you very much. You're now free to leave.
Thank you.
You're also free to sit in the public gallery if you wish to watch our deliberations.
I think I'm probably going to have a cough now. I'm suppressing
not
it.
to, yes. Thank you very much. I think one of our team is going to escort you out. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
So the committee is now required to make a decision on its recommendation to the mayor as to whether or not the nominee should be appointed as chair of OPDC. We essentially have three options. We can recommend that the mayor should proceed with his appointment of Dame Karen Buck to the office of chair of, it's written out here in full, I'll abbreviate it for our sanity, to OPDC. Or option two is that it be agreed not to object to the proposed appointment of Dame Karen Buck to the office of chair of OPDC and to write to the mayor with further comment on that. Or thirdly, that we could agree not to recommend that the mayor should proceed with his appointment of Dame Karen Buck to the office of chair of OPDC. So those are our three options. Does anyone want to kick off a discussion on which of those three we would like to proceed along? Somebody, Member Russell.
I would be in favour of recommend. I thought she gave excellent answers to our questions and seemed to have a very good, solid grasp of, what she can do as chair to influence things, and very clear about boundaries. So I listened through it all, and I would be content to recommend.
Okay. Assembly Member Bakari?
Yeah, lots of experience, and I think that really will help within the particular role, so I have no concerns.
Okay. Assembly Member Wilson?
Yeah, very happy to second that. I presume you proposed, did you propose that we recommend?
I think we're just in.
Oh, we're just discussing. Okay, but no. Well,
I suppose you're thirding because you're the third person to say it, but I don't know if that's really a thing.
Okay, well, just echo what's been said. I think very comprehensive set of answers, very interesting discussion, huge opportunity for this area, this project, to really take off and be a big contribution to what London needs, and I think should be an ideal person to lead that through the process.
Okay. Did I see you indicating as something about Small Edward? Yeah.
Yeah, just agree with what's been said so far. I think obviously part of my constituency is OPDC, or is the Old Common Station itself. I think, yeah, she has a clear understanding of the community. I think clear understanding of the challenges, and yeah, I think her experience lends itself well to this kind of role. And has a clear understanding, I think, of what the role of the chair is, which is really important.
Okay. Do you have anything to add? No. In fairness, no one's really added anything from Caroline Russell's observation at the start. I think we've all just furiously agreed. I think there are a number of challenges with this project, which we discussed in the hearing. Its track record, which we don't need to labour, the risks that are ahead for any major construction project. So I think we can make a note, perhaps for ourselves, to make sure we continue close scrutiny of it. But I don't hear any objections to appointing Dame Karen Buck to the office of Chair of Old Oak Common and Park Rural Development Corporation. So shall I propose that let me read it in full, that it be agreed to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with his appointment of Dame Karen Buck to the office of Chair of Old Oak and Park Rural Development Corporation.
Great.
Does someone need to formally second that? No. Great. I like this new time-saving approach. Okay. In that case, thank you, everyone. A letter will be sent to the Mayor following this meeting to confirm the committee's recommendation to appoint Dame Karen Buck. As I have no other business, that concludes today's meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent.
Broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.